I had been a kind of young hippie. Not a very successful hippie even, because I was never any good at making money. But what I did discover quite early on, what I really realised early on, was that you can't discover truth through thought or analysis, and I was strongly attracted to meditation. I read various things which partly contributed to this coming around to the idea of meditation, and I had various personal experiences of one kind or another which also contributed to this. And I was gradually so strongly attracted to the idea of meditation as a means of accessing myself rather than through analysis. I was attracted to a particular meditation system called TM, which you're probably familiar with. I fortunately was never, my skills at making money were such that I was never able to go into TM in any great depth, which was quite useful. It was quite a useful thing, and it allowed me to see quite a lot of what was going on in TM without actually being deeply involved in it, unlike some others. Now, I practiced TM for some years, several years, and in the course of that I met various people who it turned out were very active in propagating TM in Scotland. I spent some time at the TM headquarters in Switzerland where I met these particular people, and when I came back to Scotland I took active steps to try and find out more about what they were doing in their TM academy, which was on the shores of Loch Rannoch. And I went up to visit them, check it out, and met one or two other young seekers who were there. Now, about a year later, one of these young seekers that I met in that TM academy came to approach me where I was living in Glasgow, and informed me that there had been casualties discovered in TM, and that an Indian lady was helping to treat these casualties and correct the problems, and she had been invited up to this academy residence in Loch Rannoch, on the shores of Loch Rannoch, to help these people, and would I like to come along? And I thought, that sounds very interesting, because I was interested in all such things, and I had reason to be questioning TM. There was various cumulative questions that I had gathered about TM, and although I was still convinced in the validity of meditation as a means of becoming finding self-knowledge, there were many creeping suspicions and uncertainties that were in there, and they came to some degree into focus on this occasion. So the following week, I and another young TM practitioner in Glasgow set off to this Loch Rannoch Academy. It so happens the date was something resonant to just now, because it was about the 3rd or 4th of July in 1979, a beautiful summer's day like this. And we took the train up to Perthshire and walked the last 7 miles to Loch Rannoch. This wasn't out of choice or out of any sense of spiritual adventure. There just wasn't any other means of getting there at that point in time. And the idea of walking 7 miles had no significance to me at that time, although in retrospect it does seem to have a little more. When we arrived there, it was mid-afternoon and the place was very quiet. This is a little residence, a little residential premises on the banks of Loch Rannoch, which has probably been mentioned in some other of the descriptions. So it all was quiet when we got there, and we stayed. I have to say my memory is now vague on the details. I remember the most important things, but I don't remember many of the fine details. But to cut a long story short in that department, that evening we were, everyone who was there gathered in what had been the TM residents' main meditation room, and chairs had been set out for people to sit on, and my friend and I sat up the back thinking, well, we'll just see what's going on here and observe it nicely. So we sat in the back, and there was about maybe 30 or 40 people in the room, and we got gradually shuffled forward till we were at the front of the room. And shortly after that, Shri Mataji came into the room, and she strode down the room and sat down at the front. She was very smartly dressed, very intense presence, but very warm and friendly and welcoming and authoritative. And she said hello to everybody and then spotted us right away and said, "Ah, newcomers." And she put her attention straight on us, and she looked at me and she gave me a big, broad, welcoming smile, and she kind of narrowed her eyes and looked at me and she said, "Bad heart." And she got the bunch of people in the room to stand up and put one hand towards me, and excuse me a moment. Sorry, just give me a moment. You can edit this out while I regain my composure. Anyway, this was, as you can gather, this was, give me a moment. I don't know if time's going to help this one. We'll try and see.
You're very grateful.
It's just like a wee...
You're sharing these personal moments because this is so crucial. Yeah.
Right, let me see if I can recapture. If actually listening to the conversations earlier actually prodded me a little bit in this direction, just because it's such an enjoyable, pleasant experience to hear all these reminiscences of people that I know and who are old friends and associates over such a long period of time. Right, I'll try again. So, at that point, these people pointed one hand at me, one hand towards her, and began to chant this mantra, the meaning of which and the words of which I didn't know and don't recall. But what I do know is that at that point my heart began to awaken. And it wasn't like a profound mystical experience, it was just more like a part of me which I had forgotten, awakening. And at that point in time, I knew what was missing from TM, and it was the heart. You know, the head was there, the detachment was there, everything an ego could want was there in TM, except the heart. The heart was missing. So it's hard to tell you in those terms what Shri Mataji meant to me at that point, because the experience was really my own internal experience of normalising. It was becoming, it was something that I already knew inside myself. And so it was an experience of deep, profound relief and normalisation rather than any sort of profound mystical experience per se. And part of the reason that I react like this today is because that same recognition is still innately there, that this awakening of the spirit is an awakening of normalisation.
Absolutely.
It's not a big mystical thing, it's who we really are, you know, it's what we really are. So.
It allows you to become yourself.
Indeed. So it's, you know, except in situations like this where I lose momentary emotional stability on the matter, it's a very powerful motivator for communicating.
The power of love,
It just as a matter of how far the rest of this particular description will be relevant is another matter, but there were several TM casualties there which was the reason for Shri Mataji's visit there, which was to help these people. The people who ran the academy was themselves, of course, were there, whom you will already know or have heard of. And they themselves were casualties, and several of their pupils were casualties. And in the course of the next 2 to 3 days, Shri Mataji worked with these people and helped to clear them out of possessions that they had accumulated during the course of their practice. Now, I had subsequently spoken to people from TM who had been, on hearing about these things, had said, well, this is the sort of thing that's described by psychologists as being epileptic seizures and convulsions. But from what I saw, and I saw some very specific behaviours here, this was nothing of that sort. This was a very overt possession of a very intelligently animalistic kind that you could see in the behaviour of these people. I won't go into detail of that type just now, but that's there in description from people, also other people who were there, from other people who had similar experiences which brought about this meeting in the first place. In the course of that meeting, of course, in the course of that meeting over 2 to 3 days, Shri Mataji and some of the experienced Sahaja Yogis who were there with her gave us very profound and practical descriptions of what Sahaja Yoga was about, how meditation actually worked in your system. This was complete with many demonstrations on people possessed and unpossessed, so it was quite a learning experience over 2 or 3 days. And for myself personally, I take it as being one of the, you know, it's as if everybody has their own experiences that they have to learn, that they have to see, that they have to know about. And for me, this was one of these things. And it's partly for that reason that I talk about these things, because they're plainly to be known about in one way or another. This is part of the reality that possession does happen. And more importantly than that, much more importantly than that, that self-realisation happens. That the spirit resides in the heart and awakens and brings wholesomeness and reality to the human attention.